Your Honor, at this time, the state will call Officer Minor to the stand.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall now give the court in the case now being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, Officer Minor. Could you please state your name and occupation for the court?
Janavis Minor. I'm a Durham police sergeant.
And your rank you stated as sergeant?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me what that means when you say that your rank is as a sergeant?
Pretty much a supervisor of a group of officers, checking reports, making sure that guidelines and rules are followed and such.
And how long have you been employed with the Durham Police Department?
Since 1994, about 21 years.
And what did you do before? Because it don't look that old.
What did I do before?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
What
I-
did you do?
I was working at Northgate Mall. I worked at Macy, well, it was Hex then, and over at Sears as a loss prevention agent.
And how long have you been a sergeant?
Since 2009.
And were you so employed and on duty on December 18th, 2012?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was your, what were your duties on that day?
That particular day, I'm assigned to the K-9 unit. So I was responding as a K-9 handler.
And your dog's name?
C-Ton, C-T-O-N.
Does he bite?
Yes, ma'am.
And officer, you stated that you were on duty as a K-9 officer on that day. Did you have the opportunity to respond to a call involving an investigator Stewart on that day?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And tell me how you received that call.
Came over as a 911 dispatch of a possible gunshot wound, I believe. Once I heard the call, I responded just in case the suspect had fled on foot.
And where was it that you responded?
Where to? Forest Point Apartments, I believe the name of it.
Do you recall approximately what time you heard this call come over the radio?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Do you recall what kind of time of day it was?
It was maybe midday or so.
And tell me what you saw as you arrived on the scene.
Upon my arrival, I exited my vehicle and walked past Investigator Stewart's vehicle. He was laying on the ground. It was kind of hard for me to see him due to the fact that there were other officers kind of crouched over him.
When you saw the Investigator Stewart's vehicle, tell me about how long it took you to see Investigator Stewart. Was it right away? Can you describe that for me?
Well, I didn't immediately see Investigator Stewart. Like I said, I knew where he was simply because the other officers were there. But from where his vehicle was, it was like a direct line of sight.
And can you tell me what your hours of operation were on that day? When you say midday, your day might be different than somebody else's.
Yes, ma'am. I work a 9.5-hour shift. I either came in to work at 8 o'clock, 8 to 5, or 9 to 6, something like that. But I'm not exactly sure what my hours were that day. But it was from morning to no later than 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Now, what did you do when you arrived on the scene?
Well, once I arrived on the scene, like I said, I went up to where the officers were. Just as soon as I got up there, I thought what I heard him, Investigator Stewart, say, tag numbers on a piece of paper in the car. Investigator Black, who was there, stepped away from Investigator Stewart and began to go in the direction of the truck or his vehicle. I followed with him, and I actually was like, did he just say, that the paper was in the car? And Investigator Black said yes. We both made it to the vehicle. Investigator Black took the paperwork out of the vehicle at that point in time.
And can you tell the jury what you did once you and Officer Black took that piece of paper from the vehicle?
Yes, ma'am. Investigator Black, once he got the paperwork, he immediately took off running back in the direction of Investigator Stewart. And I said, hey, wait a minute, I've got to put this out, let me have the paper. So once he made it to Stewart, for a brief moment, he turned back and let me see the paper. And that's when I put out a broadcast of the license plate of the vehicle that was supposedly involved in this incident.
And when you say put out a broadcast, tell me what that means. Tell me what you actually did.
Yes, ma'am. I got on the radio. My call sign is K91. Said K91 1014. 1014 meaning a message, a BOLO. All right, that's the code for that. Communication would come back and say 1014 all units. K91 go ahead. I believe I said reference to the shooting of a law enforcement officer. Be on the lookout for. I think it was a burgundy vehicle, license plate, and I read the paperwork and gave out the license plate. And I believe I said that it was last seen headed in direction of Broad Street. At that point, at the end of my transmission, I said end of 1014, and meaning that was all I had to say.
And how long were you on the scene with Investigator Stewart?
I was on the scene maybe 10, 15 minutes or so, I guess.
And what if, for any reason, did you leave?
Well, the reason I left was once I put the tag number out, someone, I'm not exactly sure, ran the tag. It came back, I believe, to an address that was nearby, and an officer went to that address to see if the vehicle was there. They came back on the radio and said the vehicle was there, and a lot of the officers that were in the area of where Forest Point Apartments are left and went to that direction. As I stated, I did have a dog, so I responded there as well.
And do you recall what the address was for the tag that came back and where they found the vehicle?
I'm speculating, but it was 1330 something. I'm not exactly sure, but 1330 something, Newcastle Street, I believe.
And are you familiar with that area?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you familiar with what is located at 1330 something Newcastle Road?
The apartments.
Okay. Do they have a name that they're usually familiarly called?
Well, there's two sets of apartments there. One is Strawberry Hills and one is Foxfire. I'm not exactly sure which one it was, but those are the two that are in that general area. I want to say it was on the far side of Stadium Drive, so as you're coming down Stadium Drive from Broad Street, there's one group of apartments, that's Strawberry Hills. But as you continue on Stadium past Strawberry Hill, there's like a horseshoe road, that becomes Foxfire. So I'm believing that it was Foxfire, just based on the location, but I'm not certain.
And based on getting this information, what, if anything, did you do?
Well, at that time, as I responded, they stated that they had the vehicle in sight. I was not the only K-9 handler to respond on that day.
Do you recall who the other K-9 handlers were that responded as well?
Well, I know for a fact that Officer Mike Muse, M-U-E-S, he responded. He may have gotten there before I did. But once I got to the area, I did not go down to the scene where the vehicle was. I was just trying to look at the bigger picture. There was clearly the vehicle was unoccupied from what the officer said. I believe an officer also came back and said that they saw movement inside of an apartment. When I say an apartment, I'm thinking the apartment that the tag actually came back to. So at that point in time, I knew that it was gonna become a tactical situation versus an officer just going up knocking on the door. So what I did was I remained up on Stadium Drive and looked for a location where additional resources could come in and stage until a game plan. There was no need for everyone to go down there, so I just basically got a location for everyone to come and stage until they were directed to do further.
And were you able to locate a staging area?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was that?
I believe it was on Stadium Drive, closer to the intersection of Wildwood and Stadium. And during that time of day, the parking lots, there are townhomes that are in that area. Those parking lots were empty, so we pretty much just used those parking lots as a staging area. And of course, Stadium Drive, I think we blocked off the roadway so no traffic could come down that way. So they parked on Stadium Drive and they parked into the parking lots as well.
And what, if anything else, did you do during the investigation of this case?
Well, I'm a former tactical officer. I worked on the selective enforcement team for almost 12 years. So I knew that once they come on the scene, that they were gonna need pretty much a diagram of the actual apartment, about where the apartment is to be located. So I pretty much conducted what we call a site survey of the location just to kind of help them along when they get there.
And sir, if you could please, just for the jury, explain what a SET team is?
Yes, ma'am. SET is an acronym for SWAT. I'm sure you may know what SWAT is, but they dress up in the heavy tactical vests. They have the helmet, the goggles. Sometimes they respond to hostage situations, but they also respond to what we call a barricaded situation. And a barricaded situation is a potentially dangerous person inside of a dwelling or building, or it could be a vehicle, and is either refusing to come out when asked, or is dangerous enough to where just a normal officer, which is what I am now, it would be a high risk for me to go up and knock on the door. So they will do that themselves.
So based on your assessment of the risk to other officers, you stated that you did a site survey. Could you please explain that to the jury?
Site survey is typically, what I did was I got in my vehicle and I rode around to where they were and pretty much told them basically it's up on the second level of the apartment. Top right, I believe, is the one it was. I informed them that there was a patio. I informed them that there was a wood line if you're facing the building, to the right side of the building. I informed that there was a wood line around the rear of the building. And pretty much things like that. Just kind of giving them a geographical location of where the building is, so when they go down there, they can say, okay, that's the building right there.
And do you recall how long it took other officers to arrive?
Well, due to the nature of the call, officers they had already immediately responded. I'm not exactly sure if the tactical team was working that day, but within an hour, I would say, they were within an hour from the time that the incident occurred. I would say that the team was there.
And when you're saying when the incident occurred, what are you exactly saying?
I'm referring to the initial report of a gunshot wound that we got.
And what, if anything, else did you do during this investigation?
That's pretty much all I did during this point.
And did you ever, when you stated that you went and looked and did a site survey of the area, were you able to view the vehicle?
I don't recall what the vehicle was like, no ma'am.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions for this witness?
Mr. Charles, questions of Mr. Minor?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Sergeant.
Good morning, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think it's that slow. Just looking at the clock. Thank you, sir. Do you recall was it cold that morning? Was it cold that morning, December 18th?
That morning, I don't recall. It was fairly warm to me. I know I was wearing short sleeve shirt, but that morning, I don't know if it was. Well, can I ask a question? What time of morning are you referring to?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a good qualification. So at approximately 10:15 a.m., December 18th, do you know what the temperature was?
I don't know what the temperature was, but it was fairly comfortable. It wasn't extremely hot, but it was comfortable.
Okay, thank you. And you testified about seeing a sheet of paper in the SUV, is that correct?
Officer, Investigator Black reached in the vehicle and removed a little small sheet of paper while I stood outside the vehicle.
Okay, and that sheet of paper had 3 plate numbers, correct?
I don't recall it having 3 plate numbers.
And you used, however this came into your possession, do you know what happened to that piece of paper?
I don't. I want to say Investigator Black stood there with me while I gave out the broadcast.
In preparation for your testimony today, did anyone show you that piece of paper with the plate number?
No, sir.
Okay. And you used that plate number to call out the BOLO, to be on the lookout for that particular vehicle, is that right?
I gave out the BOLO on the license plate that should have been or was possibly displayed on a burgundy vehicle that was last seen leaving the area.
Okay. And are you familiar with the Durham Police Department General Orders Radio Procedures 4014?
I can't say that I'm totally familiar with it.
And are you, as a sergeant or an officer with the police department, for a traffic stop, are you required to call into communications?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And could you describe for the jury what your understanding of that rule is and why you do it?
Okay. It's pretty much a safety thing for the most part. Gives you location just in case you need some assistance. The officers can come and help you. In addition, keeps a record of the vehicle information, how many occupants was in the vehicle, and let me see, safety, if you need some help, where they can come find you, and a description of the vehicle.
So if you're calling out to play Do you know whether Investigator Stewart had called into communications? I mean, I'm asking you the question, do you know whether he did or not?
To my knowledge, he had not.
Okay, and is that the whole reason for getting that little slip of paper out of the car? Because
No,
he
sir.
hadn't called into communications.
No, sir.
Okay.
Had he called it in, I still would have done it. Because when I work, I'm listening to the radio. However, I'm not in tune with everything that's being said. Officers call out what we call 1061, which is a traffic stop, all the time. And it's like white noise, if you understand what I'm saying. However, if certain codes catch my attention, I'll tune in, or stress in someone's voice, I will tune in. But otherwise, it's just, if they're not calling my number, I'm just not even really paying attention. So, with that being said, had he called in a traffic stop, myself, I may or may not have heard it, and some additional officers may or may not have heard it, as well as highway patrolmen, Durham Sheriff deputies. They monitor our radio. If something like that goes on, they're gonna hear it, but they wouldn't have paid any attention to the initial call out. So,
And you mentioned the safety reason for that general order, and is that right?
yes, sir.
And does that include the safety of the citizen who stopped as well as the officer's safety?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
It's important to be on the books, right?
Yes, sir.
One moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you, Sergeant Minor, and ask you to go back to your BLET training, which was quite a while ago. Did you receive training in what the requirements of the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution?
Yes, sir.
And then at the academy goes over specific training as to the general orders of the police department.
Yes, sir.
And so both places you're learning about what the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution requires of you.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things you were taught was that the Fourth Amendment is what limits the amount of force that could be used by an officer against a person, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you receive regular updates from the police attorney about what the law requires.
Absolutely.
And that's important.
Yes,
That's
sir.
important.
Yes, sir.
And you familiar with the SBI 122 form, that's mentioned in the race-based policing general order?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And that should be filled out for any traffic stop that's not involving a license check, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you note the race of the occupant and other information about that traffic stop.
Yes, sir.
And that's important, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's important to the police department, right?
Yes.
And it's important to our city.
Yes, sir.
And that information goes to the State Bureau of Investigation.
Yes.
And then those statistics are made publicly available to everyone so we can see what our department does.
I'm not sure about that.
One moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. That would be our questions at this point.
Thank you. Any questions on redirect from the sir?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Sergeant. You may step back. Thank you.
Your Honor, at this time, we would like to have Officer or Sergeant Minor remain under
Thank you. Sergeant, you remain under subpoena with all the rules and regulations and restrictions and non-restrictions that go along with being a witness in this particular trial and being under subpoena. Thank you very much. Call your next witness.
State calls Lieutenant Franklin.
do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall now give the court in the case now being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
Tell the court your full name, please.
My name is John Gregory Franklin.
How are you employed, sir?
I'm a lieutenant of operations with Durham County EMS.
What are your duties?
I oversee daily operations within the northern end of the county, northern district. Also have responsibilities to ride an ambulance on occasions when short-staffed.
How long have you held the position of lieutenant?
Close to 10 years.
Were you working and on duty on December 18th of 2012?
I believe so.
And were you functioning as a lieutenant on that day?
I believe I was on the truck. I'm always functioning as a lieutenant, but I believe I was riding the truck that day.
What are your duties when you're riding the truck?
To perform emergency medical care to the citizens of Durham.
And did you respond to Forest Drive on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
About what time did you do that?
That I don't remember.
What type of incident were you responding to?
A gunshot wound.
Describe the scene when you arrived on Forest Drive.
Very chaotic. We were probably one of the first arriving vehicles other than a lot of the officers that were already on scene. We were quickly determined that it was an officer that was shot, which made the scene even more chaotic.
Can you describe, did you see the person who was wounded on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that?
That was an officer of Durham County.
Could you describe the demeanor and state of the wounded officer?
He was in pain. Lots of pain.
And
He had a penetrating trauma wound to his right thigh, I believe. Appeared to be a gunshot wound. Appeared to have broken his finger.
and what about the appearance of the wound to suspect that the femur was broken?
His pain did not like an area palpated or touched at all.
What did you do upon victim?
Did a rapid assessment first to discover exactly. The officer was shot. After that, we to get him into the ambulance and out of it actually commenced treatment.
And tell the court what a rapid assessment is, please.
Where you determine whether he's breathing, he's got a pulse, and if he's got a life-threatening.
Can you tell the court a little bit about your training? training and experience to make these assessments?
It roughly takes about 18 months to 2 years to gain your paramedic certification. During multi-didactic or classroom out, double that field training and hospital hours.
And is all of this completed within the 2 years, or is this in addition to?
It's all completed within the 2 years, yes, ma'am.
And is this the training that allows you to assess the victim's right finger?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do after making the rapid assessment of the investigator?
We determined what, to the extent his injuries were. We decided at that point that if memory serves me correctly, that we needed to alleviate some of his pain before attempting to move and actually start treating his injury. So an IV was established, and he was given some controlled substance to take away the pain.
Do you recall what that substance was?
It was morphine.
And was that given prior to movement?
Yes, ma'am.
What, if any, observations of Investigator Stewart did you make to assess the injury?
Don't understand the question.
You mentioned earlier that you knew you needed to relieve pain and that you suspected a break in the right femur.
just his demeanor, just the way he was grimacing, and he would, shout and yell, and he would tell us he was in pain, asking to help, for help.
Did you notice any physical markings that led you to believe that the femur was broken?
None other than the swelling and the possible shortening of the leg itself.
Could you explain what you mean by shortening of the leg?
The femur is the longest bone of your leg. There is a lot of muscles that surround it. And if it is broken, those muscles contract, and you will actually be able to see a visible shortening of the leg.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you see a visible short?
That I don't remember exactly. Note that we did not have a distal pulse.
Can you explain that?
That would be a distal pulse. The injury would be distal or below the injury, which would have been assessed in the top of his foot at that point.
And what, if anything, does the lack of...
It means he does not have perfusion,
And what is perfusion?
blood flow.
investigator Stewart transported to a medical. And do you recall what time you arrived on the scene at Forest Drive?
No, ma'am. It should be documented on the patient care report.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness.
Yes, ma'am.
Lieutenant Franklin, I am approaching you with 6 pieces of paper. Could you please look at those and identify those for the court?
This is my patient care report for that night, for that officer that day.
That's a mark for identification.
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that this would be State's Exhibit 13 for identification.
Thank you.
And is this a report that was prepared by you, Lieutenant Franklin?
Yes, ma'am.
And would this document refresh your recollection and aid you in your testimony today?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I move that State's Exhibit 13 be admitted into evidence.
No objection from the defense.
Thank you. State's Exhibit 13 is admitted.
Lieutenant Franklin, what time did you arrive on scene?
We arrived on scene at 10:28:58.
And is your patient report able to, does that patient report in front of you indicate at what time the call went out?
It does not say when the call was received, but it says when it was dispatched. It was dispatched at 10:23.
And at what time did you leave the scene?
10:40:43.
And what time did you arrive at your destination?
10:47:51.
Your Honor, permission to reapproach the witness.
Yes, ma'am.
Lieutenant Franklin, Your Honor, the state will move this time to publish State's Exhibit 13 to the jury via overhead projector.
No objection from the defense.
That's allowed. We're going to have to adjust those points and ensure that we appreciate it.
Lieutenant Franklin, at the top of this report, it does say that the patient name is Gilbert Sanford. Tell the court why it says that.
He was given an alias due to being a Durham police officer to protect his privacy.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant Franklin, tell the court once more why that says Gilbert Sanford.
Being a Durham police officer, it was given to him to protect his privacy and identity.
And this notes that even though you arrived at your destination at 10:47, it says in service at 12:11. Please tell the court the significance of those times.
During the times from arrival at the hospital to our in-service time is the time that we spend cleaning our truck, getting all our equipment put back where it belongs, and completing the patient care report, which you were looking at.
Lieutenant Franklin, I'd now like to turn your attention to page 5 of this report. And this actually has a narrative on it. If you could tell the court, while I focus, what that narrative is and what the purpose of it is.
The narrative in our report is just a brief summary of what we've seen initially, what we did for the patient, and any results of our treatments from that patient, from while we had that patient.
Please summarize that narrative for the court.
Basically what it says is we were dispatched to a gunshot wound. We responded from station 1. When we arrived, we found a 26-year-old black male, conscious, alert, and oriented ×4, laying in the roadway in severe pain, with blood noted to the right lower extremity. Patient stating that he had been shot. Clothing was removed. The initial assessment is there. Gross swelling to the right lower extremity. Gunshot wound noted to the, I'm not sure what that says, probably the outside, I don't know, what is that? Can we move that just a little bit? To the inside portion or the outside portion, anterior portion of the thigh, with a possible broken femur. We didn't note anything else. The patient stated that his pain was 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. No distal pulses were noted to that extremity at that time. It goes on to state that the IV was established and the patient was administered 5 milligrams of morphine prior to moving. Due to the crowded and chaotic scene, lower extremity traction maintained while the patient was rolled onto a long spine board and placed on the stretcher. When we got him into the unit, he was still complaining of severe pain, 8 out of 10 at that time. He was given 5 more milligrams of morphine at that point, and the traction plant was applied to his right leg to try to alleviate some of the pain also. Once we did that, we got pulses back in his right lower leg. The secondary assessment, which is a complete, thorough assessment at that point, revealed no other injuries or abnormalities. He was placed on a monitor, which he was in a normal sinus rhythm at that time. And he was transported, lights and sirens, to Duke University at that point. We established a second IV while we were en route, with the patient still complaining of more pain during transport due to movement. So he was given 5 more milligrams of morphine prior to arrival at the ER. At that point, he was discharged to the resuscitation rooms at Duke, which are also the trauma rooms, with a verbal report given to the nurse and a host of other trauma physicians that were there.
And then beneath that are the letters GF. What are the significance of those?
That's my initials, Greg Franklin.
Thank you, Lieutenant Franklin.
Any additional questions from the state at this point?
Just a few. What was the purpose of giving the verbal report to the nurse?
Because I did not have a written report complete at that point, and in all patients, we have to transfer care. This patient was in my care at this point. I have to transfer it to someone, and usually that's done verbally with a verbal report of what's wrong, what it was the cause of it, and what we did while we had it under our care.
Connor, could we have the exhibit turned into the clerk?
At some point, we'll turn that into the clerk.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Franklin, those are all my questions.
Thank you. If you'll just then take those on over and leave the exhibits with the clerk and just indent that either one of you want to refer those exhibits up. That'll be it.
Your Honor, may I intercede and retrieve that exhibit?
All right, well, there you go.
Here, that's even easier. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I approach the clerk and I ask court's permission to table these together?
Any objection to that?
No objection, Your Honor. It is a 6-page document.
Thank you.
May I approach the witness?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant.
Good afternoon, sir.
The injury states exhibit 13. And among the things you noted on your report was the officer's weight as 200 pounds, is that right?
That's probably what he told me.
Okay. All right. You didn't weigh him?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. On page, I guess 5, there's 2 places where it's noted about whether there were other injuries. So up on the second paragraph, it said no other wounds noted. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then down below, there was a second assessment and revealed no other injuries or abnormalities, correct?
Correct.
And when you're going out to a call, are you communicating with Durham Emergency Communications?
Yes, sir.
And is it important for them to know where you are?
As far as where?
Well, I mean, when you get somewhere, do you communicate with them?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that's important, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, let me direct your attention. Page 2, and down at assessment, part of your assessment, you evaluated Investigator Stewart's airway. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you looked at his nose, looked at his mouth,
Correct.
and you noticed, you saw his lips, correct?
Correct.
And whether he had any injuries to his teeth,
Should. Yes, sir.
and you didn't note any broken teeth or blood in the mouth, right?
No, sir.
And if someone was bleeding from the head, that would be something would be important to know, wouldn't it?
Yes, we would probably have seen that.
That's important to know, whether someone's bleeding from the eyes, the mouth, the ears, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So getting to your assessment, down, you assessed the airway and you noted, what did you note there?
He had a patent airway.
What's that mean?
Means he's able to make the problems. What's it?
For your assessment?
Sir?
What did you note? Did you note the head in the assessment, did you assess with no abnormalities? Is that what you wrote down?
No, no abnormality.
How about right eye? Same.
Yes.
So assess with no abnormalities.
Able to see. Able to see.
And left eye,
Dilate properly, all that.
I'm sorry.
Dilation problems.
And left
Reacted to light.
I'm sorry. I keep talking.
And reacted to light.
Same. May I have a moment?
Yes, sir.
That would be our questions.
Any questions on legal action on the state?
No, Your Honor.
You can do that statement. What do you say? They call you next time.
Your Honor, at this time, we do have another witness on deck. However, given the hour, we would state that it may be a good time for a break. So that we can also do some next witness.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our lunch recess. I know you'll recall all the admonition I've given you previously, and re-emphasize some. Do not communicate with each other, anyone else about the case. Allow anyone to talk about the case in your presence. Do not take the parties, attorneys, or witnesses. Receive or attempt to receive any report related to from any source, and do not form or express an opinion about the case. You'll leave your pads there that you're personally doing. You are excused until 2:30. It's now while everyone else remains seated, jury is excused. Any matters we need to add, we can recess. Take a recess until 2:30.
Court's in recess until 2:30.